Episode, you're going to meet Lillian. She is an inspiring life coach with one of those strangely familiar stories around how she transformed her life from living in the drub and hub, avoiding wanting to tend to some of the things that had happened in her childhood, and how it was she discovered the ways to speak her truth and really accelerate quickly through that healing. These are great teachings and you will really enjoy this interview. Make sure you share and like and subscribe. Allow your heart to listen. So, welcome, Lillian, to the podcast. It's a real honor to have you here. And just to let our podcast listeners know a little bit more about you and your journey, I'd love a little bit of background around how you came to finding a way to express your authentic voice this time. And that might be quite a big journey. So you're welcome to start with a little bit of it, and we can always break out the story into chunks.
Yeah. I started to realize that I need to find my authentic truth when I realized that I was living a life that was not who I was meant to be and live. I realized that the truth that I had in my life, so the goals that I've set for myself, the life that I thought I should live and be and build, and this whole identity was never mine. And it took me to hit my rock bottom to realize that. And I don't wish everyone to hit their rock bottom, but I would always say this too. If you do hit rock bottom, it's not a bad thing. Because I remember when I was at the lowest low, I just told myself, I said, well, the only way to go is up from here. I'm already so low. Like, what else can I do? Right. I mean, it is at one point, it was like life or death because I felt very depressed. I spent my whole life getting good grades, going to good school, getting a good career. I'm Chinese, so in my culture, I have to get married by 30. If you're not in a relationship after 27, there's a term they call the leftover woman, and you could Google it online. It's everywhere. There's documentaries made of it, but that's a part of the culture. I know. I know.
Harsh. That's really harsh.
It's very harsh. So I got married at 29, had my baby at 29. And at that time, there was a lot of rushing it, right? Because a lot of family pressure, societal pressure. But looking back, I'm like, I was a baby. I'm in my 40s now. I'm like, what was I thinking? But it was this rat race. It was like, oh, I have to get this done. I have to buy a house. I have to have a family. And then when I got all those, I was like, this is it. This can't be it, because I wasn't happy. And, when I say I was checking these boxes, it felt like it was my whole life. And for me, and I'm sure you hear this a lot from just Asian cultures in general, like the definition of success is to become a lawyer, a doctor, or an accountant. And I was neither. I was in the film business for a long time. Right. So even that, it was that striving of I'm proving that I could do this. I'm proving my success, and I'm proving a place for myself. And I realized that who am I proving to? Like, the person I should really be proving to is myself. When I had reached all those milestones, I wasn't happy because I forced a marriage. And I've learned, you can't force anything. Force negates. So I got to the point where my marriage wasn't in harmony. So that was a disaster, right? I was building a business, and because I felt like I'm 30s, I should do this. I need to be running a team. I should have it all together. Like, now I'm looking back, I was like, I was still a baby, but there is that paradigm, that belief that I should have it all together by then. And again, I was trying to force things together, and that's when everything fell apart. And when everything fell apart, I think the biggest thing for me was like my own identity, because I associated my identity and my self-worth with all these successes that was really not mine. And I live in Los Angeles. big city, very competitive. So I associated my identity with my job title. What kind of job title I got, what kind of projects I'm working on, who am I, right? I actually just recently saw a mentee of mine 10 years ago when I was in film. And he said, yeah, I used to be very snarky. I was like, I'm not surprised because I was trying to be the who's who. I was trying to associate with myself with the so and so, right? So I was saying that I'm so glad that I had to break down because I took a pause. And that pause was not saying that I don't belong here, but it was like, let me discover who I am. If I am not this project, if I'm not this producer, if I'm not this person's wife, right? I knew one thing, I was a mother, and that was one thing that was enough to drive me because my son at the time was only 2, 3 years old. And I knew whatever it is, like I'm going to get back up and I'm going to rise above it because I don't want him to live the life that I went through. Right. And now I knew that I was in that cycle. It was time for me to break. And that's when I started to begin to find my authentic self. I mean, it got so bad. It felt like overnight. Like I lost my marriage, I lost my business, I lost my house. Everything was in the storage in my car. And now all of a sudden I was like staying with a friend for 2, 3 months and another friend while I have my 3-year-old son going through a divorce. Right. It was now I could talk about it, but in that moment, it was so dark. There is a block. And I was like, I'm not living the life that I want. I
Mm.
was living a life because I felt like I had to. But did I really? And that's where the beginning of searching who is Lillian? Like, who am I? How would you describe yourself? Because I didn't know how. And then finding a bigger purpose and bigger calling. Um, like my why do I do what I do? What is that one thing that is bigger than me? Because at the time I wanted a dramatic change. Like I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I didn't want to feel like this is the end. I wanted to know this is the beginning. But to do that, it was a transformation had to happen. It was that mindset shift. It was that becoming someone else. It was having a complete different new focus that's going to be able to drive me and lit that fire up in me. And I always say this, it's okay to fall, but rise like a phoenix. That was my mantra.
Beautiful.
because in my mind, and also especially coming from Hollywood, there's a saying, you are as good as your last project. And it's still a saying.
Yeah.
And I don't like that saying because it's so judgmental. It's toxic, right? You've seen so many stories of amazing people. They have these comeback stories. So that tells me that you don't need to be chasing, but you do need to take time to really learn about yourself. And in this time of learning about myself, I really realized that there's a lot of deep rooted childhood traumas that was so deep. I didn't even like, I wanted to forget that I've ever happened in my life. But I realized that without dealing with these traumas, what happened was it manifested in my relationships, in my decisions in business, and my relationship with work, my personal relationship, my marriage, my friendships, um, and it keeps this little girl trapped inside, and I always feel sorry for myself. And that's where the healing really started because when I was transforming as I want to do something bigger, I realized I got to take care of this little girl that is inside me and finally give it some love and attention and be able to heal around that so I could focus on growing the grown up Lillian, growing um, into this other woman, to this other version, into this authentic self that I believe will be a lifelong process that we will always discover and grow and evolve. And then this little girl will always be here with us, our inner child. But it's how do we spend time to nurture it? And once I understood that, a lot of things changed, and that's when the inner work started to start. right?
I love that realization that you needed to take care of what was that little girl so that she could be cared for going forwards. And it reminds me of just the expansion principle that you want to expand in your life, right? You want to transform it, which is a form of expansion. And if you don't take care of all of the little bits that are within what's going to expand, they're going to expand too. So if you expand with a crappy, not cared for, pissed off little inner child, right? She's going to wreak havoc as your life gets bigger, which is obviously what was happening to you. And so it's like, how can you get her to be a part of that expansion and in a whatever kind of way she wants that expansion to be?
And if I could add, I realized that without dealing with it and tried to like just push her aside, it was holding me back in a lot of things I didn't even know that was in my subconscious.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't know. Like it is a lot of work. Like would have never known if I didn't seek help because I was so
Beautiful.
used to it. That's all I knew until someone was my mirror and they pointed it out. And then even me was like, oh my gosh, you're right. And now I have to look into that. Right. It is a scary, in my language, it is very scary to look at your own shit sometimes because it stinks. And that's when a lot of people don't want to. But it is very nice to be able to cleanse it out. That's when the cleaning process to understand, that's when the odor goes away. Things start getting clear. You can see what you ate. You can see why it's not good. And then now we could completely change that whole system. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. And it is, I mean, yeah, whatever your journey is, whether you talk about them as bodyguards, protectors, whatever the kind of relationship is, I think that supports a person the most with where those coping strategies have come from as a child and how they're holding you back and that actually you don't need them anymore because now you're a grown up and you can hold that little one and learn to take care of yourself. And it's funny, it really reminds me of in my 20s, actually having a conversation with my best friend who was having this really erratic behavior. And it was all in response to her parents. And we were just talking and I was like, well, we're grown-ups. We don't have to do stuff just because that's the way we did it when we were at home with our parents. Like we can choose to go, I'm free from that. Right. And ignore, your parents' response because you don't live under their roof now. And it was a real liberating moment for both of us. Didn't stop both of us from still, walking around with loads and loads and loads of baggage and shit for quite a while. But even just that realization, right, that you're your own adult and you get to choose to not behave the way that you've always behaved. Yeah. I think it's just quite a liberating and an empowering moment. And we have these little moments, I think, for quite a while before often we get to that rock bottom as well, where it's like the little nudges are there. And like you said, it's nice to help people avoid getting to that rock bottom place. Yeah. And then seeing those little reflections back, sometimes it can feel a bit like, oh, that really stinks. I don't want to look at it, And I'm a 100% student at avoidance strategy of dealing with my crap. So that's what I'm really good at. So I really honor people who have that resistance too, because it's uncomfortable, right? And I think there's also the fear of, you knew you wanted to expand, but what were you going to expand into? And when it's something you've never known and what you've always known, like there's that safety of the comfort. So how did you feel about moving into that from comfort into the unknown?
So for me, when I was hitting my rock bottom, the best thing I've learned is this is when you accelerate because the life lessons I got was immense. I mean, I think that was like an MBA to the 5th degree or something like that. And for me, when your back is against the wall and I have my son, you really just try whatever it takes to make it work. But the biggest thing that helped me to do that was to completely change my circle in my environment. So I moved away. A lot of people I stopped talking to. And it's really not them. It was for my own frame of mind because I used to be in this mindset of I'm so scared and worried about what other people think. Have you experienced that? What is this person thinking? Right.
Oh, yeah.
And I was taught that way. My mother still this day be like, don't do that. Other people are not going to like it. What are they going to think? But I really don't care now, but I did before. And one thing I realized, a lot of these kind of clouded thinking of worry about what other people think. It's what I'm thinking, what other people are thinking. It's not even the truth, right? But because I was in this space of rapid transition, I mean rapid because I knew I had to make something work. Like whatever it is, I have to make it work and have to make it work right now. I don't have time. The easiest thing for me to do was to change in a whole environment with with people that I don't know, and meeting new people. And it was so beautiful because this whole world opened up. And when this whole world opened up, I didn't have to worry about people looking at me or saying, oh, what is she doing? She's not doing Hollywood anymore. It was like, oh, you're doing this now. Right. And I also learned once I knew when I was changing and I was becoming someone else, what happened was when I get rid of the people that are not in harmony with me, I have room for people that are looking for me to come in. And that's very beautiful. And that's how I got into personal development. I got into coaching. I was Bob Proctor's consultant for a long time. And that's how I started my journey, because I found him on YouTube. And he said, your success is guaranteed. I mean, it's all over the internet. If you follow him, you'll see those videos. Or you tell me what you want, I'll show you how to get it. And for me, it was like, that's exactly what I needed to hear at that very moment, because not that many people will say your success is guaranteed, using the word guaranteed. So I kind of went on this rabbit hole of closing anything out. I'm sorry, Lillian. I'm sorry you're going through this. What are you going to do? Like putting all this worry and doubt in me, but I got laser focused on this is what I'm going to do. And that's how I got into coaching. And
Awesome.
Because one thing I've learned, one thing he said too, as you are changing, he always says, teach other people, because that's the biggest accountability. And also when you're able to teach other people, that means you're doing it yourself too. So that was the very beginning. So when people ask me like how you did it, I said, I just saw an opportunity and I went all in. I maxed out my credit card to buy a business. I went into it. And then before you know it, I've coached like people literally all around the world. And I didn't really have time to think about the how. I didn't really have time to let the naysayers come in to be like, well, don't you want to do this instead of that? Why would you want to do that? Right. We have a lot of those. And that all goes back to because my back was against the wall. I don't have time to waste. I got to pick an option and make that decision to run with it. And that's what I did. And everything that happened in the past was still a great experience, because even though I made a transition in what I do for a living, everything kind of worked out for full circle, because a lot of these experiences and wisdoms that I've had in different businesses, they all applied over here too, right? So everything worked hand in hand, especially storytelling, because in film, I did a lot of development to, come out with an idea so we could start to shoot, get directors or actors, all these readies, right? We call that development. And storytelling. I'm like, we use that every single day in our life. And my whole thing is now I'm not doing it for a director or a movie or for a job. I'm helping everyone create their own movie in their life. And that's how everything came full circle, like seamlessly.
That's beautiful. I love the way that you can see like what you had in the past that you could bring into your new career. And I love the idea of the stories that we tell, and it's like, choose a story that you like rather than a story you don't like. Right. And make that the story that you want to take forwards. What's the empowering version of the story that you're telling yourself rather than the I'm a victim story.
And you just said something really powerful. Choose a story that you like. A lot of people don't know they have the option. I didn't know. I was just sort of on this automatic, and I would say stuff like, oh, well, the reality is, and I realized the reality is whatever I tell myself what is.
Right. And it's frame of perception. And I think, in a different but similar way, when I had my brain injury, there was no choice, right? There was no going back, as it were, for me either. So when I was in that rock bottom, and so I had to find another way. And I realized that my negative thinking had to change from all the mental health stuff I'd had before my head injury. And so for me, it was like, I need to learn to laugh at myself and take it lightly that I'm constantly burning stuff, that I'm always hurting myself because I'm too confused and I can't follow 4 steps. in a row because I didn't have that occupational kind of memory function that we need to do normal things. And so, I could get really sad and be more negative and be like, oh, and people would be like, oh, I'm so worried about you, Nid. Oh, you shouldn't be living on your own. All these, the sad worry conversations, right? And I had to find it in myself to make it light. And, those are important resources that, whatever your journey is to finding like that turnaround, it's those moments at the bottom, I think, that you have to be like, what is that I have to shift? That I really have to like grab hold of. And that is the thing that's going to move me forwards.
Yeah.
And it's finding the people that support that, definitely, who you can then kind of, you need to make space for the good people to come into your life, which is scary as well, to let go of the support that you've known and what's possible, right? What are the, not knowing who's going to appear.
And that's the exciting part that I would share with everyone. There is abundance out there. I used to feel like my network, this is all I know and I'm doomed. And people are watching, like, because I was in that mindset of like a rat race and everything is competition, and right. But now it's like, actually, there's a lot of amazing people out there. If you just put the intention out and find ways to meet them, because that's been my experience. And that actually, for myself, it took a lot of fear, because I was raised by a single mom. I never had a dad. And it was me, my brother, and my mom, very small family, that it's just us. So, being able to really understand there's a whole world out there, and there is some of the people we haven't met yet, when you put it out there and you meet, a lot of them become your family. Like my best friend since high school, he's like my family. And my point is this: when you put it out there, you'll start to attract the right people. So always give it a chance. And this is where I say, I just let go and let God. I let the universe take me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I want to just jump back to what you began. You kind of mentioned it, and obviously we've talked about a few things since, but you'd mentioned about your actual like starting to heal the inner child, which obviously is a key part of finding that authentic voice, right? Not rather than, it can be one thing to say, right, I'm going in this direction, these are the people, I'm open to. But when you've still got that inner voice that's kind of going, but, and what about this? And, whatever that little girl had as her fears, like, how did you address that when you were in such an accelerated transition?
So it took time. So my childhood trauma was sexual abuse. So it's very heavy. And I couldn't even talk to my therapist about it until 2 years into therapy. That's how difficult it was for me to talk about it. I could talk to you about it now. And I went through like healing journeys. I did a lot of work on myself. And my whole experience has been this: when I tried to pretend nothing happened, when I tried to shut it down, it was very sad, because like even now as I'm speaking to you, I could visualize that slow girl just sitting there waiting for any kind of love and attention. And when she didn't have it, she reacted. And that's how I was when I was a kid, because you don't know how to talk about it. You don't really know what happened. And then I realized that the trauma really began when the little kid didn't have a safe place to talk about it. That's where the root of the trauma is, right? If you had a very strong, safe place, anything happened, you could still heal from it. But that's why it took me so long. So for me, it was to recognize. So like the way I would visualize it is like I opened the doors to finally see her. And then I started to have dialogues with her. And for me to start, the blessing for me to start to deal with it later in age, especially when I have kids, that's when my whole perception changed. Because before I would always feel like, is it me? I'm not a good kid because, I didn't have my dad. So there was abandonment issues right there. And then when things were happening to me, it changed my whole relationship with men. Subconsciously, I didn't know. Right. Which led into my marriage and like a business partner and so on and so forth. And when I started to see that as a mother, it is not my fault. Actually, you should have never been in that situation. The caretaker should be taking care of you and not abusing you. that's when the shifts start to happen, and having this inner dialogue. And it's me consoling myself now as a mother, because I will never let my kids go through that. And that was the biggest change. And that was actually the biggest fire in me, because I promised myself, I am not my mom. I will never, ever, ever, not be there for my son and let anything happen to him. Because the people that were supposed to care for me, that my mother trusted, were the ones that were abusing me. Right? She didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't tell her about it until I became an adult, because I didn't know how to talk about it. And I obviously had to work on it myself before I could communicate. But the thing is, like, once I start to see that, there is more warmth and then there is more nurturing. So, because I have 3 kids myself, all boys, I
You
feel
really
like,
are healing that wound then with the masculine,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah, and I'm really just seeing myself very differently. And that was a whole inner healing journey, and understanding why some of the beliefs that I had, and complete change that, shift those beliefs, right? The I'm not good enough, I'm ugly, I can't do this, to who I am. Oh my gosh, I'm broke. My
Mm.
mom always had struggle with money when we were growing up. All of these, to completely shift that belief so I could focus on everything, on creating the life that I love for my kids. Because, you know, one of the things that I intuitively or subconsciously manifested since I was a kid that I didn't know was my own family. Uh, my mom was never there. So I was always praying to God that I don't have a family now, but I'm going to have a family when I grow up. So that's why when I lost my first marriage, it was devastating, because I thought that was it. Like, I wanted it so much, I was forcing it, that I would have done whatever it takes to make it work when it was just not working. The beautiful thing is, because I hit rock bottom, I worked on myself. Now, as a modern family, I'm remarried. I have a stepson, my son, they're only 6 months apart. We have a new baby. He's 2 years old. And our relationship is just it's wonderful. It's healthy. It's empowering, because I get to be me. No one's trying to mold me into shape anymore. And it is this journey that staggers, and it's non-linear, but it's coming together as you grow. And that's where the confidence starts to come in, and it'll still um, keep growing. In fact, I recently just called my old therapist to say I really now want to go very deep dive into work on my childhood trauma. But the trauma wasn't the sexual abuse, because I worked on that. It's the deeper layer. It's my relationship with my mom, because I
Mm.
realized that I try to forgive her. See, I use the word try, because I think there's still a lot of pain of, why wasn't she there to protect me? And the space of, I didn't feel safe at that time. And my whole goal with that process is, I want to find a way to heal from that, to understand why I feel the way I feel, come up with, a solution, a shift, so I could, forgive my mom, love on her. But the biggest thing is not let that bleed into my family. And I know there's a little bit of that still holding me back to, where am I going? So because
Mm.
I've hit the rock bottom the first time, I was scared to address a lot of things. This time I'm walking in, I know exactly what I need to work on. And I'm looking forward to that journey of continuing the healing process. And the more I go into it, the more deeper I go into, which is a very beautiful thing. And having that gratitude that we actually get to do that, because I know my mom went through trauma, my grandma went through trauma. It's a generational thing. They weren't able to make these healing or have these experiences like you and I do, or have these conversations, because they just simply didn't have the resources.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
Right? They didn't have the resources, they didn't have the awareness. In Asia culture, mental health is not a big thing, because you don't see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they ignore it. They don't believe it.
Well, and time frame wise, we're a similar age, so definitely in our childhood, mental health didn't exist
Yes.
back then, and so we were just being difficult children. If we did act up with our mental health, and so you're just a
Yeah.
difficult child, and so the response from a post-war kind of era parent,
Yes.
and I think parents, people born up to the 60s, because they're still that baby booming generation, they are that post-war, the trauma of the war is in them, and so the
Yeah.
parenting is different, and understanding that doesn't necessarily help you heal and get to that forgiveness, but it gives that understanding of why it is that maybe they'll never heal from that trauma, and why your parents aren't going to change and aren't going to hear you turn around and go, you should have been more like this, which we can do when we're going through our healing, right? And trying to find what that truth is. But actually, like you wisely said earlier on, finding new people where you can be yourself rather than trying to change old people in your life, including your family, and expecting them to understand you and forgive and make amends for things that have happened in our childhood. It's not that relationship has to be acted upon and changed
Yeah.
by you speaking about it. Like it can be something you can do depending on the relationship and the people, but actually, it's that talking to your inner child, it's that addressing the trauma so that she knows she's safe, and so that you can take her forwards as you keep expanding in your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. I always remember this. Go to where you belong. Go to where you're accepted.
Mm.
Yeah. Don't force anything. And I
No.
take that in life. Relationship, friendship, work. Right. When I see people go to interview, I always remind them it's a two-way street. It's a
Most.
two-way street. It's not a one-way street. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it just that energy moves you forwards, right? And that passion, that drive that you have of how you see that healing in your family, right? And as a mom, and that healing through, I mean, there's something really beautiful in two aspects of what you've shared, is the, part of your healing is through service, is through helping other people, is part of your ability to show up and really land the teaching and help other people. And therefore you can take that home with you to your kids and your husband, and like your family grows from that too, and that heals
Yeah.
even more. So it's multifaceted, right? And I'm sure
Yeah.
there is an element that then goes back to your brother and your mom, eventually,
Yeah.
and in certain ways those relationships get more peaceful over time, a
Yeah.
greater acceptance. But it's not always easy. Kind of, how much do you need to share or say along some of those processes? And so having someone like a partner who can really accept you and allow you to be yourself, and whatever the moods are that Lillian might have, just like the
Yeah.
variety of moods that Nid has, and having a
Yeah.
partner that's like, that's okay, dear, or yeah, wonderful,
I always say, um, one advice I'm going to give my all boys, all three boys, is choose your partner wisely. And the one key word is harmony. If you feel harmony, when you're talking to each other or supporting each other, and you guys both have your goals. So it's not about one person sacrificing another person. One person sacrificing his or her goal for the other person, but it's like, how do you have a goal together and grow? And that's where everything starts to flow, adding to what you just said earlier. The resistance come in when you just feel it. Like, I don't have to go into it. You just know it's not working. But most people, like the old younger self me, is like, even when I felt it, I ignored it. And so I would invite people to really listen to that
Mm.
feeling and that energy within inside. Because when it's relationship, you could feel it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it really resonates with my first marriage, is a similar kind of, knowing it wasn't going to work. And I remember when I got married, that feeling of being like, we have a family, just me, him, and our dog. I was like, we have a family. And that for me was that same feeling of like, oh, wow, I finally have a family, like I finally felt like I had a unit, because I never felt like I belonged in my family. And so it really resonates, that kind of, we make those choices, right? But we know it's not working, and we don't know sometimes what to do about it.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not working. Is this one where I stick at it and I try and I like, I'm just not working at it enough, as people say, you have to work at a relationship, or is it actually, because I've
You
tried
have
to
to have the
make
courage.
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there are nuances in that we have to work out, and sometimes there's wisdom and age that helps you have the hindsight to understand that difference.
Have you seen that movie? Sorry, this is a very like big moment for me, but have you seen that movie Eat, Pray, Love?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I've watched that when I was in my 20s, early 20s or mid 20s. Anyways, I just remember I was not married or have babies. And I was like, who would do that? I was like, you have your marriage, you're supposed to be there for them. And, you got to stick it through. You can't just leave. That was in my early 20s. But now when I watch that movie, I was like, oh, I so get it. And if I look at Julia Roberts' character, I was like, she is a woman of courage. She is not, it was a tough decision, I'm sure, but she was able to say, this is not working. This is not for me. And I really want to live my life to the fullest. So I'm going to make this decision that is make a lot of people not happy, but actually it's probably doing something better for everyone, because that means when she left him, the husband, he probably met someone better, right? And she get to live her life. We don't know, but when I always think about that movie, how dramatic my perception that movie is at the different stage of life that I'm in.
Yeah, totally. And I think when you're younger, you want to avoid that. Like life is more dramatic when you're younger. As you get older, you kind of go, yeah, I'm okay with a bit less drama. That's all right.
Yeah.
So you kind of, you roll with things a little bit more as you get older too. You're just more well-versed at dealing with more drama. So there is an element obviously of maturity and experience of repeated drama that happens in life, and of getting through those big transitions, which is, takes a huge amount of courage, as you say. And I feel like it would be really nice to just drop into where you see like finding that truth, finding that authentic voice with courage, like identifying that difference between the fear holding us and kind of what is that courageous voice? Like, what are the kind of things that come through that are the courageous voice saying, I'm taking you over here?
Yeah. They say when you speak to God, that's praying. But when God speaks to you, that's meditating, that's receiving, that's really listening to that voice. Because it's very easy to bury that voice if there's a lot of fear. But if you can really hear it, that's called intuition, right? When you can really hear it and just know it from every cell of your body, that is where I am meant to go, even if you don't have a logical explanation. It's a gut feeling. That's when you're stepping into courage, because it is the unknown. And it is true where once you can overpass the fear, you're flying, right? And that's the key. We could go through all this, we could have our stories, but when you know what you want, and it is scary, it is uncertain, but you just know my mantra, everything's always going to work out for me. So fear not.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Because I look at my life, I was like, look, everything worked out. I'm here. You and I are talking. We're having this beautiful conversation. So fear not. Let's go.
And sometimes I know that, and I look at some of my old journals and I can see there's moments where I just knew I was lost and I didn't know what to do. And so if someone's in that place and they're like, I don't know what to do, I'm just confused, what is that courageous step? Like, what would you say to someone who's that lost?
The first thing I would say is ask yourself a question. What would I love? I think that's the first step, because most people, when they're lost, they don't even know which direction to head to. And to have your power back is to own your own vision, right? The difference of if people have their own vision, once they know where they're heading, the final destination, they're going to come out with different ways to get there. But the people that don't, maybe person A will be like, you should go into real estate, or you should do this, or you should do that. It's really not a solid direction until they're like, they could own up to it, right? This was where the blame game could happen. I did this, well, it didn't work out. It's all your fault. I mean, not everyone's going to think that way, but that was the old me. So I would always tie it back to, what is it that you love? And I would always ask them a question too. Like, if today is your last day, what do you want to be remembered as? What do you want to be doing every single day? And if we take it further, think about, just imagine, how old do you think you're going to be living? For me, I'm guessing maybe like 85. I'm 41. So that's about like what, 44, 45 years. So I was like, that's still 45 years I'm going to be living. Like, how do I want to live? And if not living the life that I want, then that right now is the time to change. Because if you don't change now, you're going to be more of the same. And if you're more of the same, then why are we talking? Right. So that's what I would do first, because once they can figure out what they will love and what they want, that itself gives them a direction. That itself takes them out of that uncertainty. That itself gives them a vision where they could create. Van Gogh, he sees it in his mind before he paints it. For us, we see what we want in our life before we go out and live it and create it. Right. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And
I would say, like, because I was sick for so many years with my brain injury, it was very hard for me to see where I could get to, because there were so many years where I wasn't well enough to get there. Right. And so it was like a patience and perseverance game. And I found that there was also a part of really knowing what I wanted to feel and just choosing things that helped me feel that way every day. And that moved me towards being able to move into those visions, even though it was a slower process. So there's also, like, for me, it was like, does that choice take me towards greater sense of peace and love, or does it take me more towards feeling rubbish and no energy?
Yeah.
Like, literally, it's like more energy, less energy. That's really how it works.
Right? I love that. I do that. I call that my feeling good hack. So everything you said, it's like, I always try to do something that makes me feel good. It could be the littlest things. Like, I'm going to have a very good cup of coffee to start my day. Or today I feel like maybe I didn't have a good start, or my kids. I'm like, I'm going to treat myself to Starbucks just because I deserve it. And then just to get that good feeling going. And you're right. The patient is very important, because a lot of people, they don't know what they want. It does take time. And I always say, never rush it, because I've learned rush is a form of fear.
Yeah.
It's
Definitely.
your life. It's your choice. And sometimes we all have different backgrounds and histories and paradigms. It's going to take time for you to realize. It took me time. Everything I'm telling you right now, I'm 41. It took me like 5-6 years of solid work of learning myself, unlearning myself, talking to you about my trauma, continue to do the deeper work. So it's not going to happen overnight. So don't feel rushed, but know that when the minute you start, you're already in process. You're already setting things in motion.
Yes. Right? And I love the combination, I think, that comes up here in our conversation, that and with your sharing of there's like that personal acceleration of, I'm going to go here. I'm going to start fresh. I'm going to clear the energy of everything that's past. I'm going to put myself in an environment where I've got people who are opening me to new possibilities. And then I'm going to be of service and really put that out into action, because that's my way of really integrating and embodying, right? As I hold space for someone else to come into what the transformation, and that helps me up level my own transformation. Then you take that home, and then at home you see the healing, right, that needs to happen to you personally for you to then do that next level transformation again in the work and up level. And it's as though the things at home and the healing at home, although that's also the part of your trauma that can hold you back, like you saying, I acknowledge that it's the next stage is I want to do the forgiveness with my mom. That's the next expansion also in your work, right? And that will be the next expansion of clarity of that vision of where you're going in life. And so there's this beautiful layering of all these aspects in your life that are helping you do this up leveling that, you can see how they feed in. And it's like, okay, where do I need to go get support? Where, now I don't need support. Now I need to do the following thing, and I'm supporting others. And so you have that reciprocity also happening of when you need support and when you're supporting other people, and how that plays into your awareness of whether or not it's a time of patience and just choosing the nice Starbucks coffee in the morning, or whether or not it's time to be like, I've got a vision and I'm moving with it and I'm actioning it. And so you're presenting a really beautiful example of the different layering that happens in that authentic voice and how it is that you're expressing that, and also
Yeah.
listening to it in all those
You
different
just broke
areas.
that. I was just gonna say you just broke that down so beautifully. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to listen to this podcast.
It's just, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, and that's what I love about these conversations is like you come in with so much wisdom and experience, and then it's how can we reflect that back at each other so that the listeners can have a really simple way of understanding what we're talking about, but also how it reflects for both of us, like really beautiful learning and understandings for ourselves. So
Yeah.
it's a really multi-dimensional, multi-layered experience. I find doing these interviews and meeting people and sharing that with other people so they can hear it.
And I love that you use the word multi-layer because and I'm sure you know this, a lot of people they could be in their 50s or 60s and 70s. If they don't do the inner work, a lot of people they're an 8-year-old trapped in a 50-year-old body.
Mm.
Right. There's a lot. I was that person, that an 8-year-old trapped in a 30-year-old body until I started to recognize and I started to realize, and that's when the maturity came in. That's when the EQ come in. You said earlier, like as we get older, we have more wisdom, so we don't deal with the drama, or we know how to handle it. Like that's EQ because we know it's not worth us getting worked up about it. Things will work out, and that to me is life and its growth, and it's all these multi dimensions that we're constantly working on. It's so nonlinear to the point that it's very beautiful because everything, this is where like I can see that universe where all the stars just align in a way that makes no sense but also beautiful, and there's no formula to it, but when the atoms compound, you just know that's right for you. Right.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a beautiful expression of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that emotional intelligence piece, it's interesting you said the 8-year-old because I'm a Gene Keys guide, and the emotional intelligence is formed between 8 and 14 years old. It's kind of that era of our life. And I would say, like, I remember looking at my ex-husband and always being like, he's a 9-year-old trapped in a grown-up's body. It's kind of like there's so much of that age where we're really discovering our independence and how we feel about the world. And that gets so trapped depending on the kind of childhood that we have, right? And whether or not we've got parents that can educate us and give us the support to express our emotions, or if those emotions are suppressed, and then we're just walking emotion bombs, basically, if we're not taught how to express them properly as a child. And so, that is a huge part, I feel, of where we're at. Just generally, I think probably at least in the West of our healing, right, is that acceptance and understanding of emotions and that emotional intelligence. Like that's a really current emotional evolution. Where do emotions sit in the body? How is that connected to connective tissue? There's so many aspects of that emotional intelligence that's so key because it can undermine some of that mindset side of things. And I'd just love to give you a moment to talk a little bit about, for you, whether it's in your work or your personal life, because we've touched on the layers of, you go out and work and then you come home. Like, where does that emotional intelligence and mindset work and interact? How do you see that in people's healing and growth?
One thing that I've learned is the universal laws and the principles. That's one thing I really learned from Bob Proctor. And when I understood, like, for example, law of success is it requires you to fail a lot, but your success is on the way. Because my old mindset will be like, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. It's not good for me. It's not for me. Or how do I deal with people? Right. Impression of increase. Always leave people better before you met them. We're raising each other's energy in many ways, and treat people how you want to be treated and respond and not react. That's called the law of least resistance, right? The more I'm responding, like if someone's hitting me, I don't have to punch back, but how do I dance gracefully around it? So it's interesting because I remember the first time I did my EQ test with my therapist when I was like early on, like learning about myself, it was not the highest. But once I understood these principles, that's how it helped me flow, and understanding that every single one of us have our own paradigm, our own thinking, our habitual way of thinking, our thoughts, our beliefs. Everyone's going through something different. And so when I speak to people, it's very easy to see their paradigm and, based on how they react, because I know it's a paradigm that stemmed from their childhood. Probably it's the awareness. It doesn't get to me as much, right? Though I have to say, and I want to be very real, because I do have kids, and it's a 2-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an 11-year-old. They know how to push my buttons. So on that end, I'm still like working on my emotional intelligence, and I would say I'm improving on it. I'm constantly having these dialogue with my kids, and I'm very interested to see how they're gonna turn up. My son, he's 10. The other day, he showed me a YouTube short. It was about this millennial mom, me, having a talk with their kid. Like, I'm so sorry when I had to put you through that. It was mommy's fault. I'm going through that. How are you feeling? Like I kind of do that with him too. He's like, this is you millennial moms. And I'm just circling back to what you said earlier, because like our generation, we have the awareness and we don't want to pass that to our kids. And a lot of parents are very aware of this. And now our kids are learning all this. So I would love to see when they grow up and how they're going to interpret it, like what they learned from us. Because we're talking about our childhood, right? So I want to see what that is. That was what was running through my mind when you were talking about the little kid and the adult, and I'm thinking about my kid. I was like, oh my gosh, 8 to 14 emotional intelligence, he's 10. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, like, because I guess, I'm not a parent, but, the perception piece is so important, right? And we're born into the life experiences we're going to have, and the perceptions we're going to have, the lens we're going to look through as a child. And obviously, the Akashic Records work that I do, I just see it as, you have karma, you're going to attract it in, and, you're going to have that lens regardless. And it doesn't matter. Your parents will be perfect, and your interpretation of your perfect parents will be perfect for the life lessons that you need. It doesn't mean that everyone's happy. It just means that we all get the lessons.
Yeah.
And your parents will, whatever their well-intended behavior is, and like that. And that is the thing, is always remembering that everyone's always doing the best they can with wherever they are. That intentionality, regardless, as a millennial parent trying to be emotionally aware, trying to not pass down all of these ancestral wounds, like that still leaves whatever interpretation that is for the next generation, for whatever the next generation's got for healing, that's gonna be coming through. So it's a fascinating process, right? And we can acknowledge that none of us are perfect in it, but we're also being perfect for everyone that we interact with.
Yes. I like to say we're perfectly imperfect.
Yes, exactly. Love that
And I'm okay with that.
And so I'd love to know, is there anything else that you'd love to share with the audience around speaking your truth, or something else that you would like to mention in terms of your work that you'd like to offer to support them with?
Yeah, I would say, if you're listening to this podcast and you're looking for a truth, that's a sign. That's a calling. There's a reason why you're here. And I always like to say, you're exactly where you need to be, but you're not meant to stay at where you're at right now. So if this is helpful, ask yourself, set the intention for your life. If you know intuitively there's changes that has to be made and it's difficult, but that's true to you, then I would say have the courage and go and do so. And you'll find a support system out there. There's a lot of amazing resources out in the world once you put yourself out there. Yeah.
I love that. That's such a beautiful, wise and kind and supportive thing to share, Lillian. And I also want to add that I saw on your website there's tons of free workbooks and explanations about all of the laws that Lillian was mentioning, and things that you can go and download and have a look through. So I'll put that link below under the episode so that people can go and find that. And then obviously they can get in touch with you via your website as well. And they're really beautiful resources, guys. So do make sure you go and have a look if that resonates with you and where you're at. And Other than that, is there anything else you'd like to share before we close today?
I would say let's go and rock and roll.
Hey. Life is meant to be fun. I think I really do believe, like, I think we're here to find joy and to joyfully express ourselves. And sometimes we can get a little caught up in things being serious. And, we do need to seriously take care of those wounds, and care for those with their tender feelings, but also, let's enjoy and have some fun and play.
Yeah. I always say this, like, there's a lot of healing and taking care of myself. But then I also believe it's your job to make it rain. So I'm healing, taking care of myself so I could go outside and make it rain.
Oh, lovely. That's beautiful.
That's just my little mantra.
Oh, you've got great sayings. I love it, Lillian. Thank you ever so much. They're really, really beautiful. And it's been an absolute joy to share this conversation with you and to learn about your story. And I do hope the listeners go and enjoy all of your resources and connect with you in the future.
Thank you.
In the next video, we're going to be returning to a meditation practice. This is a different approach to our loving kindness that comes from the light body lineage, which I'm very excited to be sharing with you. So make sure you hit subscribe to get that as soon as it's released, or you can become one of our YouTube members and access it immediately because it's already been out on pre-release there for the last month. Take care. Thank you for joining. Have a wonderful day.